welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time to tune in to our webinar, 6 interesting chatbot use cases for learning. Really excited about today's topic. I'm going to move pretty quick through the presentation, show you actually some chatbot examples. Would love your interaction, questions, ideas, brainstorming. So please, if you're tuning in via Zoom, use the chat function. My colleague, Corey Richards, who's on the line, is also a panelist, will help me make sure I get everyone's questions answered so we can have a good discussion. If you're tuning in via LinkedIn Live, you can use the comment feature in LinkedIn, and Corey will also be keeping an eye on that. Everyone that's registered for today's webinar will get a link to the recording afterwards, and look forward to getting your feedback on what you think about today's webinar. So let's get started. I will start by introducing myself. I'm Vince Hahn, the CEO and founder of Mobile Coach. You can point your phone at that QR code if we're not connected on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with you. I like to post, of course, about chatbots, but also just like to post on all sorts of things going on in my life, as well as love to see and connect with, see what you're doing on LinkedIn and connect with folks. And so please connect with me if you haven't already. And if you've got questions for me outside of today's webinar, of course, you can use the chat. You can email me at vince@mobilecoach.com. So just maybe a little bit of introduction about me. I'm a technologist. I founded Mobile Coach 8 years ago. Mobile Coach is my 7th technology company that I've started, and live in Utah. I'm an avid runner, long distance runner. It's my primary hobby. I like to run on the roads, marathons. I also love to run on the trails in the mountains. And so that is what I like to do during my free time. So just maybe a little bit about Mobile Coach. Founded in 2013, as I mentioned. Our primary product is the Mobile Coach platform, which is a chatbot authoring and management tool. Plan on giving you a little bit of a glimpse of what that looks like today. As we talk about chatbots, naturally people think, okay, I can now imagine a chatbot for learning, but how do I make it? And so we'll give you a glimpse of how that would how you would make it using our platform a little later in today's webinar. And essentially, the value proposition for the Mobile Coach platform is to enable you to design and manage one or many chatbots for your organization without having to have engineering teams or software developers involved. So that's a little bit about Mobile Coach. Now that's a little bit about me and Mobile Coach. If you wouldn't mind in the chat just dropping in, where are you from? Where are you dialing in from? We'll get a sense of people and where people are in terms of the audience today. So we'd love to see in the chat where people are residing and tuning in from. So welcome, Nathalie from Germany. That's great. All right, so I'm going to start today's webinar by just talking a little bit about chatbots in general. Oftentimes when we have a conversation about chatbots, a lot of people immediately think about their own experience as a consumer of chatbots, which typically is like, you go to your bank's website and a chat window pops open. It really primarily functions as a customer support use case. Or maybe you go to some vendor's website and a chat window pops open, and that functions more as sort of like a sales, trying to lure you in and get you engaged from a sales perspective. Both of those are probably the most common types of chatbots people interact with, and that's described here on the left-hand side of the screen, Chatbot Types, where it's a public-facing website and the functionality is fairly transactional. Once you leave the website, you no longer interact with the chatbot. If you were to go to the same website over and over again, you would get the exact same experience because it treats you as a brand new user every single time. So that's this public website chatbot. In the middle of the screen is a variation on the theme of that, where it's still a web-based desktop focused type of user experience, but now you're logging into some sort of web portal. And so the difference can be that chatbot can be made to be smart to recognize who you are. So now instead of like on the left here, the chatbot might just treat you as an anonymous user every single time. Say, hey, welcome to our site. How can I help you? Over here, the chatbot could say, welcome back, Vince. Last time we talked about X, Y, and Z. Is that what you're here for? And so now all of a sudden the interaction can be a lot more personalized. And then the third type of chatbot that I want to talk about is having a chatbot on a common mobile messaging platform on your phone. And so a common mobile messaging platform could be SMS, it could be WhatsApp, it could be things like Microsoft Teams that maybe your corporation uses. But the fundamental difference with a chatbot on a common mobile messaging platform is that you now have a persistent connection with the user. So for both of these first two categories, as soon as I navigate away from the website, I no longer can communicate with that chatbot. And so therefore, when you're designing those chatbots, you could design them to be very transactional, meaning when I say transactional, I mean, you ask one question and then you're done with the user experience. If you have a chatbot on a common mobile messaging platform, all of a sudden you can have a persistent connection and you can create a user experience where you actually have a relationship with the chatbot and that the chatbot can initiate messages. And we'll talk a lot about that in the use cases today for learning. In the 6 use cases I'll go over today, most of them will be optimized for mobile. Some of them will be of these types too. So you can use all 3 types to effectively service learners. But based on the type and modality of the chatbot will inform the sort of instructional design behind what the chatbot says and what it does. So then I'll talk a little bit about chatbot modes, and then we'll jump into this to this use cases. I've used the word transactional a lot. Another sort of synonym for that is passive, meaning it's waiting for the user to initiate. Even if you go to a website and the chatbot in a chat box opens up it, and sometimes that's annoying. You're like, oh, get out of my way. You look for the the way to cancel that out. Even in cases like that, it's still pretty much a passive experience because it's not going to do anything until me as the user interacts with the chatbot, either asking a question or clicking a button. So another mode is what we call a programmatic mode. And a programmatic mode is much more advanced than a passive mode because now you're creating a decision tree of what you want your chatbot to say, when you want it to say, to whom you want to send that message to. So I'm trying to describe that or communicate that through this diagram of a decision tree diagram. All of a sudden, you can have all these different sort of decision trees that triggers a chatbot message. And so this can get quite elaborate. And when you start to design a chatbot experience for learners, a programmatic sensibility helps a lot to really put the right message in front of a learner at any given time. So hopefully this will become crystal clear after you see some of the examples that we're going to go over today. Again, just as a reminder, if you've got questions, please put them in the chat. I believe, Corey, do we have a poll set up for this?
Yes, we do. I'll launch the poll now.
Thank you. So these are the 6 use cases I'm going to go over today. And I'm just curious which one are you most interested in? So we just launched the poll. If you could answer, we'll give you a minute to answer. And that will help me sort of know how to emphasize each one as we go through these different examples. So great, about half of you have answered. We'll just give you another few seconds to vote. Then we'll actually share the results. Training, reinforcement, onboarding, micro-learning courses, coaching, learner support, LMS chatbot. All right, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. let's see. There we go. Share the results. Hopefully everyone can see the results on your screen. Training reinforcement is the number one, 42% of the votes. So that's great. That's going to be the first one I'm going to talk about. So thank you for joining. Interesting that no one voted for onboarding. Typically, that's a pretty popular use case as well. So let's dive into these use cases. Let me mention, because I did talk a little bit about the different types of mobile messaging channels that a programmatic chatbot could be on. Some of the common chatbot channels that we've seen show up on the right-hand side of this slide. SMS, WhatsApp, Facebook. A principle about choosing what channel to put your chatbot on is you think about the word frictionless. Where will it be the most frictionless for your learners? And the answer to that depends on what country they're in. It depends on their configuration at work. So for example, in the United States, SMS is a really frictionless channel. My family and friends, they know the best way to reach me is through SMS. So that would be a great channel to use if someone was trying to target me. However, if I'm in a job where, let's say I work in a call center, and part of the policy of the call center is that I have to put my cell phone in a locker. Well, then that's not going to reach me very well if my cell phone's not with me. So these are all sort of these considerations when you choose channels. And so you find channels that are most frictionless to your intended audience. What's nice about mobile channels like WhatsApp and Facebook and Telegram and things like that is that wherever I'm interacting with my friends and family, if you can have your chatbot on that same channel, that's going to be really the most frictionless path, where I'm not having to download anything new. I don't have to create a separate username and password. I'm just interacting with the chatbot just as if I'm interacting with a friend. It's one of the most powerful advantages of using chatbot technology. Now, again, as I alluded to this use case of the call center and locking away my phone, some corporations will have other policies that might prevent you from using your first channel of choice. So for example, I've had a lot of experiences where I've had people who want to create a chatbot on SMS, but their employer says, well, we can't, you're not allowed to use SMS per our privacy or security policy. So they're having to find some other modality that will work. With the advent of the pandemic the last couple of years, we've seen a huge proliferation in collaboration platforms like Teams and Slack and Zoom. And so the good news is that those platforms support chatbots as well. So pretty much anywhere where you can message somebody, you can put a chatbot. And so, the good news is that there's a great deal of flexibility of where you can put a chatbot. So I'd be curious, just if you could put in the chat, if you could create a chatbot for your sort of intended audience, what channel or channels would be the most interesting and realistic for you? Would be curious, and I think it'd be interesting for the others in the webinar to see what your answers would be. So see Slack as one. So yeah, please drop in the chat what channels would be most interesting for you. So now let's dive into the most interesting use cases. Let's talk about training reinforcement. So training, when we started Mobile Coach 8 years ago, we used to call this use case post-training reinforcement, because back then, most of training that we were supporting and that our clients who were running training programs were classroom-based training programs that were in person, 1 or 2 day workshops, and they were looking for a solution to reinforce that training after that in-person training. So we used to call it post-training reinforcement. We no longer do that because while a lot of people still have classroom-based instruction, whether it's virtual or altogether, where training is more of an event, we're seeing a lot more sort of spaced learning architectures. We're seeing a lot of sort of more blended training architectures. And so just generally training reinforcement seems like a better term, but the principle is the same, where you have some sort of formal training module or learning experience, and you want some follow-up. You want to make sure people are being reminded and being held accountable to the learning. It's mitigating the forgetfulness curve. It's helping people apply the training on the job. And so these are, I think, the key principles behind training reinforcement, and why it's such an interesting and wonderful use case for a chatbot. And so basically the way I describe this use case is that if you could make your chatbot smart about the content of the training, then all of a sudden that chatbot can be in a position to follow up, to remind, to nudge, and you can create user experiences. You can see on the slide here where there's quizzes, survey questions, check-ins. You can actually accentuate the learning by sending new material like articles or things that support the training. So I'm going to show you an example of this. But if you want to try a demo, each of the use cases that I'm going to present today, we have some demos for you to try. Corey's going to copy and paste this information that you see on the slide into the chat, so you don't have to try to type it in yourself. There are a couple ways to try each demo. In each one, we have a USA-based SMS number. So if you're not in the US, then we don't have, for today, we don't have an SMS, but we've got this Teams link and a web widget option for you. For all the SMS, all you do is pop open a new message, put in that phone number, and then say hi, and then you can experience the demo. So this is the training. So let me show you what a script could look like. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the programmatic aspect of that. So here's a script that that is a follow-up or a training reinforcement example script for a diversity and inclusion class. So I'm not gonna read this for you, but I'm just gonna park the script. So we use the word onboarding to describe when someone interacts with the chatbot for the very first time. That's the onboarding experience to the chatbot. So you can kind of see this is a script that someone's written where it's introducing, the chatbot's introducing themselves. Hey, I'm Coach Danny. Here's what I'm going to do. You can text stop to opt out at any time, which is, by the way, a great best practice. And the other best practice to articulate here is to make sure that you are setting the right expectations of what the chatbot's going to do. For a lot of chatbots for learning, you're going to want your chatbot to be proactive. So not transactional, not passive, but act proactive. And so with any sort of proactive messaging, you want to be sure that people know what to expect so that it doesn't feel invasive or spammy or like a marketing thing. And so we always recommend when you're designing a chatbot to set those expectations. So you can see that here where the chatbot's saying, I'm here to remind you to remind and apply this training. I'll only text you 1 or 2 times a week for 4 weeks, setting really clear boundaries. And then I'll just go down to week 1. You can just see that this chatbot's sending images. It's asking for some feedback. So there's some, this is just a basic script. There's, of course, there could be a lot more complex decision tree triggers in here, but I'm just giving you a sense of what this would look like. You can also see the programmatic aspect of this, where in this particular script, we want this message to be sent on a Thursday at 9 a.m. Now, why 9 a.m.? You can choose based on your target audience what time of day you'd like to send a message, what day of the week you want to send a message. So that gives you a sense of what scripting would look like. And then here's some screenshots of how that would look via like an SMS channel. So hopefully that kind of gets some light bulbs going on in terms of training reinforcement use case, the types of things that you can do, and what that, sort of what the programmatic aspect could be. So if anyone has questions on that or ideas, please drop them in the chat. But that's the training reinforcement use case. We see a lot of these use cases when people are using our platform to design chatbots. So let's go to the next one. The next one, I believe, is onboarding. I'll do this one very quickly because I know not too many people, if anyone, voted for this when we did our poll. So onboarding is somewhat similar. And now Corey will drop in these links if you want to try the onboarding one. But you know, it's the way I like to describe this is that imagine like a traditional new hire orientation where I'm showing up. My business unit that's hired me for my job is eager for me to hurry up and start my job, and so they're telling the onboarding team, "Hey, you can only have Vince for a day or for half a day for orientation." Typically, that means I'm getting hooked up to a fire hose and just trying to, you know, consume more content than what's realistic for me to consume, including forms I have to fill out, HR policies, required training, security, compliance stuff. Maybe there's also, cultural things, mission statement things that I'm trying to get up to speed, all at the same time of trying to, hurry up and learn what I'm supposed to be doing in my new job. So that description of that orientation, like, well, if don't hook people up to a fire hose if they're not going to be successful in being able to consume all of that. What about dripping that over time and having a micro learning experience, giving people the information at a pace that they can consume? So that's sort of how I like to describe the new hire onboarding use case. And this can be onboarding people not just on HR related stuff, but it could be based on cultural things too, getting people acclimated around the culture and extracurricular activities, saying, hey, did you know we've got, book clubs, or maybe there's interests clubs that people can join, to help them get up to speed. So I wanted to do the same thing here and show you an example script. And every time I do this, my goal of showing these scripts are not to be prescriptive to say, hey, here's exactly what an onboarding script should look like, or an onboarding use case should look like. But my goal was showing this is that in my experience, when people can start writing what the chatbot's going to say in their minds, then all of a sudden the idea of this programmatic chatbot comes alive for you to say, hey, what if could I send this message when these conditions exist? Once you start being able to do that, you start getting really excited about the possibilities for a chatbot. So you can see a lot of similarities here with the onboarding chatbot script here, where chatbot's introducing themselves, and then I'll just kind of slowly scroll here so you can see some of the ideas that this script contains. You can see some administrative things as well, reminders. Of note, you'll notice that both of these scripts so far make it really easy for the user to interact with. Yes, no, true, false. Chatbot technology, you don't want it to imply that it can be smarter than it is. So I always tell people, and maybe some of you have heard me say this before, where Hollywood and the movies have really done chatbot designers a disservice by, portraying artificial intelligence like C-3PO in Star Wars, or Jarvis for Iron Man, where they, can have an emotionally intelligent conversation. Chatbot technology is not quite there yet. So you want to make sure that people don't get stuck, and so you try to make things as simple as possible for them. So you can see examples of that here. So that's the onboarding use case. So let's go back and go through these others. Microlearning, this one's really interesting. So I would say, 8 years ago when we started, people really only thought that sending a reminder would, is sort of the breadth of functionality for a chatbot. Today, we're seeing much more belief and actually evidence where people can interact for 15, 20 minutes at a time with a chatbot in a much more meaningful, deeper cognitive level. So, you can imagine actually, take a e-learning course that takes an hour. Maybe there's, 30 slides with a voiceover on it. Sure, that could be a nice user experience, could be effective. but could it be more effective if that you take that content and drip it over a week or 2 weeks, and have it be more of a micro learning type of user experience? I think there are a lot of use cases where that is indeed the case. So the way I like to think about micro learning, or like to communicate this use case, is think about current curriculum that you have and converting it into a chat user experience. So let me actually show you instead of a script, I want to show you an actual example of this. So we developed a chatbot in partnership with a company in Australia and we called the chatbot Frankie. And I started this chatbot on April 16th. And I just barely finished the user experience. It was an 85-day user experience. And what Frankie does, Frankie's a virtual coach, and it's an anti-burnout use case. And so it walked me through many different modules to teach me skills to, recognize and deal with stress, to make sure that I'm sleeping properly, making sure I'm breathing properly. And so some really wonderful tools that were all taught through a chatbot. So let me just scroll down. So this user experience is much more than just sending simple reminders. You can see there's a lot of back and forth. There's videos here to watch. And then the way that this chatbot started was with an assessment. And so I'm going to skip all that opening stuff. And so here it assessed me on sort of burnout related questions. So you can see question 1, I find it easy to stay focused and productive. How often is that true for you? So it's pretty, this took 10 minutes to go through to really think about the questions, but I was able to do that. And then based on the assessment, it then decided what skills I needed the most. And so I'm going to scroll down here. As you can see, the assessment was quite comprehensive. And then the first coaching module it gave me was a sleep challenge. So let's look at that real briefly. So the sleep challenge was says go to sleep at your natural bedtime 10 nights in a row was the challenge. So throughout that 10 days, sent me some videos teaching me about the importance of this. There's science behind this. There's a chronotype thing that I thought was really interesting. And then it asked me and held me accountable. Like, hey, did you go to bed on time? Let's see if I can find one of that. Well, you can see here, did I go to bed on time? I said no that day. So it was a very different than the other use cases I was showing you, because this really is sort of a micro learning course. So I think that use case can be really interesting, micro learning, in terms of the types of things you can do with a conversational user interface. I think can be really, really dynamic. So that's the micro learning use case. The next one is coaching. We get asked a lot about coaching, and probably because coaching, first of all, coaching is really valuable for any professional, and also coaching can be very expensive when you're talking about executive coaching or getting professional coaches involved. So let's say I've got a workforce of 10,000 people. Would it be helpful for all 10,000 people to have an individual professionally licensed coach? Absolutely. Is that affordable? Not for any company that I'm familiar with. And so we get asked a lot, well, hey, can we virtualize coaching so that we can get benefit from coaching across more people? So that's probably a reason we get asked this a lot. The answer is you can do, if you break down what a coach does, you can automate a lot of it. You can't automate, you can't automate all of it. Like a coach isn't going to be, sometimes a real skilled executive coach is almost like a psychotherapist in terms of helping an executive maneuver through the complexities of their job. So, a chatbot's not going to be able to do that. But a chatbot can do a lot of other interesting things around coaching, like accountability. You can see some of the things here, goal tracking. I think conversation simulators are a really great use case for chatbots. And so there's a link there that Corey just put in the chat. Try that out. If you, this is not SMS, it's just on your browser. And so doing simulations and scenarios and queuing can be a really great use for a chatbot for coaching. So let me show you a script example for coaching as well. I'm doing a lot of toggling, so I appreciate you bearing with me. There's a coaching script example. And so in this example, this coach is described as a guide and really is being positioned as an accountability partner. So let's look at some examples. Well, first you can see it's very common to do assessments and survey questions. And then here's this example. What's the habit you want to practice this week? Getting things to be personalized for the coachee based on their response. Then you can send tips. Then you can hold them accountable. How successful were you at this? So again, give you an example of if a coach, a human coach, is doing a lot of this already. If you take this off their plate, then maybe that human coach can actually have more clients at your organization, or you can create and design a chatbot to handle and automate sort of this accountability piece and tips and things like that. So kind of have to tinker a little bit based on your organization's coaching goals, as well as sort of the demographic and the culture of your target audience. But after that tinkering, you can figure out what type of automation in terms of coaching interactions can be really effective. So yes, all these links will work always. And so there's just a questions in the chat. So you can even share that conversation simulated link with colleagues that aren't on the webinar. Be happy to have them try it out. And there's, if you go to mobilecoach.com/demo, there's actually several conversation simulators on that page that you can also try out too. So learner support is like a fancy term for just really customer support. In as much as your learners are your customers, then wouldn't it be great to have a chatbot to help people right in the moment? And so it's really a similar use case where if I'm a customer and I've got a question, can I just go to a chatbot and ask the question versus having to call into a contact center or have to wade through a huge knowledge base to try to find my answer. If I can just ask the chatbot, then that can be a lot easier. Similarly, your learners in your organization are going to have a lot of questions. And so having a customer service chatbot available for them, I think is a really compelling value proposition. You can have that on like a HR system. You can have this on a Microsoft Teams, so it's really frictionless. You can have it via SMS, or you can have it all in all of the above. So you can see some examples on this screen here where, if someone's asking about, maybe this is a sales rep saying, all right, we just got trained on this new product line, but I need the pricing right now because I have a prospect asking about it. Instead of trying to dig through and figure out where that was, just ask the chatbot, what's the pricing? And then having the chatbot respond. Having a chatbot that can answer acronyms. Raise your hand if your company has way too many acronyms. Imagine being a new hire, being put into some sort of meeting and you're wanting to contribute right away, but all these people are, spitting out acronyms that you have no idea what they mean. You're not going to stop the meeting as a new hire to say, hey, wait a minute, what's that acronym mean? But in the course of the meeting, if there's a chatbot that you can just say, hey, what's this acronym? I think that's a really wonderful use case. And so these are just some ideas of providing learner support on demand when people need an answer. So that is the learner support use case. And then this last one is LMS support. Now this is an idea that we've had for years, and people would always say that would be interesting, but now, especially the last year, we're seeing a lot more real movement towards having LMS support. So this is putting a chatbot on your LMS. And so you ask yourself, well, why would you want a chatbot on your LMS when the LMS has a search function? It has a way to navigate and browse. But you know what? one of the key reasons why chatbots exist is this term frictionless. I've been using that a lot today, but that is a big value proposition of chatbots, where yes, I might know that I can search for something, but if the chatbot's going to get me my answer in less clicks, you're just going to get a lot more user engagement that way. So I think that's a really great way to position a chatbot. Now, when you have a chatbot on the LMS and you make it programmatic, then all of a sudden when I log into the LMS, instead of feeling overwhelmed about what do I do next, what if the chatbot just says, hey, Vince, based on your job function and how long you've been here, here are the next 3 courses we recommend for you. You know, that's a great user experience where you're just making it more simple for the learner. Or you could even put someone on a track, you know, a learner journey with a curriculum of courses that are suggested for them. And the chatbot could be programmed to be smart about, hey, you started this course 3 weeks ago and you're not quite finished. Click on this link to finish it. Again, you know, just creating things to be a lot more frictionless. Now, as a bonus, if you design the chatbot to have dual modality, meaning you log onto the LMS and you have this web-based LMS and you have this web-based chatbot experience, but then that chatbot follows me to Microsoft Teams or to Slack, then that can be like a great powerful tool. So an example would be, I get into the LMS, but maybe I don't log into it for a month. I have good intentions to, but you know, work gets in the way. And so all of a sudden the chatbot wakes up on Slack or Microsoft Teams and says, hey, Vince, remember that course that you started? Here's a link back into the LMS to finish it up. You know, I think is some really compelling user experiences for LMS integration. So those are the 6, I think, 6 really interesting use cases for chatbots if for learning. If anyone has questions about that or any of those, or would like a little bit more information about any of those, please say so in the chat. But I want to take a minute and do just a quick authored demonstration for you. So now you might ask yourself, okay, I can imagine writing my script. So I can imagine, if I go back to one of these scripts, I can imagine sort of writing my journey. How do I make that come alive? Well, you know, there are different ways to do that with different chatbot technologies. In our platform, we believe for programmatic chatbots, we're the most robust and easiest way to author. And so I'm just going to give you a quick glimpse of how to do that. So authoring chatbots in Mobile Coach, you come in here and there's a scripts tab. You come in here and you write the message that you want the chatbot to send. We have features where you can write it in script form here. You can add emojis if you want. You can add multiple versions of the same script. You know, one advantage of a chatbot is that it's not software that you have to deploy. So it makes it really easy to A/B test. So you might want to experiment with, hey, I want to say this message in 3 different ways. And then later on in the analytics, see which one resonates the most with our users. That's what this feature here is. You can add different ways to say the same thing. Gives you a chance to experiment with personality and tone and length of message. You know, that's the script box here. So now that you've positioned, here's the message I want the chatbot to send. Now you want to tell the chatbot when to send that message. Now there are different ways to do that based on the rules that you're trying to create. So for example, if I skip over to the calendar function here, let's say that I want to, you know, remember one of these scripts I showed you said, hey, I want this message to be sent on a Thursday at 9 a.m. So I can choose Thursday, 9 a.m., scheduled to be sent. We also support program days, so day 1, day 2, day 55, day 180. We also support calendar, like actual calendar day. Send this on July 22nd at 10 a.m. So different ways to send calendaring. I always like to show the calendaring because it's an easy way to communicate the programmatic aspect of chatbot design. And then over here in the conditions and actions, this is where you do the decision tree thing. So I can add conditions to say, you know, if the user responds with a certain thing, then send this message. Or maybe I could say, you know, if this user says their goal is, showing up on time or time management or something like that, then you can create a condition and then say, okay, if that's the goal, then do this action or send this rule. So without getting into all those details for today's webinar, I just wanted to give you a sense of what the authoring is like. We could spend a whole day talking about the authoring features in here, but this hopefully just gives you a visual of what that's like. And of course, just really quickly, there are different sort of advanced features that you could utilize, like creating custom fields and then creating an API connection to those custom fields. So an example of that could be, I've got a roster of all our people. Let's say that I'm creating a chatbot for sales training. So I want to have location in the chatbot system, so that if someone's in California versus New York, maybe the pricing's different. And so I can create an API connection with their HRIS system, populate a location custom field with New York or California based on where someone's located. Now all of a sudden I can use that as a condition to say, hey, if someone's in New York, send this pricing. And if someone's in California, send this other pricing. So that's how the conditioning and the decision tree stuff works in our platform. And of course, we've got all sorts of reporting where you can come in and see response rates, how people are answering questions. You'll really live in the report dashboard so that you can understand how your chatbot's performing, as well as doing a lot of this A/B testing to make sure that your chatbot's really resonating with people. Of course, you can author in different languages, so any language you can type in, you can have the chatbot send messages in, so you can support one or more or many languages. So that just is a very quick snippet about how our platform works. Many folks like to try this out, so if you have interest in that, we do offer sandbox accounts, or you can actually just buy an author license. So let me actually talk about that for a moment. So to get started, if you say, hey, this is really interesting, I want to try an experiment or actually have a program where this would be perfect for, I want to build out a chatbot for this. The way you can get started, you can either purchase an author license and get going. The author license includes all the training. We'll actually help you build your first chatbot as you get trained on the platform. Or a lot of people say, hey, we don't have the time for that. Vince, can your team actually build us our chatbot? We'll give you all the training content. Can you turn that into one of these chatbot experiences? And we do that all the time too. So you can have us do that, or you can do it yourself. So if you want any more information about that, you can contact me, and I'd be happy to provide more details on that. So with that, I'd be happy to take questions. Any questions that you might have on anything you've seen today, or things that you're hoping you would see that I didn't cover. Happy to take any questions. Either put them in the chat, and then Corey can let me know if there are any questions coming through LinkedIn. All right, well, if there are no questions, if you do have questions that you'd feel more comfortable just asking me, drop me a line at vince@mobilecoach.com. But it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you for taking the time to join today's meeting. Hopefully this was interesting for you and you got some good ideas about how to use chatbots. It was a pleasure for me to spend this time with you. And so for those of you that don't have questions, you can drop off. I'm just checking the Q&A section here. It does look like there's a couple questions in the Q&A, so I'll address those now. So Elliot asks, how do we contact you? What's the full URL for the tool? So you can contact me at vince@mobilecoach.com. The URL for the tool is admin.mobilecoach.com, but there's not a way for you today to just create your own account. You actually have to work through our team, and we'll provision an account for you. So if you can reach out to me, I'd be happy to get you set up, Elliot. And then an anonymous attendee asks how much an author license is. The author license is $200 a month or $2,400 a year. You can decide how you want to pay. And that again comes with all the training and the support. Allows you to build one or many chatbots. Just another comment about that. When you have an author license, you're able to create as many chatbots as you want. Our business model does have an end user license component to it. So If you want to go live with those chatbots, then we would need a contract where you purchase the number of end user licenses for your target audience. So just want to make that clear. So, okay, I think those are all the questions. Thank you again. Everyone, again, we'll get a link to the recording of this webinar. I appreciate you joining, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful rest of the week. Thanks for attending.